This is going to be a very interesting session. My friend Barbara Takei here, she will, uh, yeah, she will give the opening bit on Tule Lake and renunciation. So,
Hey, everybody. Welcome, and thank you all for being here on this panel. It was listed as a panel on renunciation, but there's a whole lot of other stuff. Renunciation is a pretty complex area, but we're really so fortunate today to be able to show the film that Emiko put together because really renunciation has been so kind of tied up with the propaganda, wartime propaganda, that people were forced to renounce because they were bullied by the Hoshidan and, all of these radical groups. And it's really just not the truth. It's part of the wartime propaganda that diverted attention from what the government did and what the government had done in order to take away birthright citizenship and deport people that they didn't like. And the people they didn't like were the people who were segregated to Tule Lake because they protested the injustice of the incarceration. So if you think about what's going on now, and with all of the wartime propaganda, or all of the propaganda that we're hearing about the rapists and the terrorists and the need to deport them, to get rid of them, there are so many parallels to what is going or what happened in Tule Lake. So I think more than ever, the story of Tule Lake, the story of segregation, and the story of the Renunciants is more important than ever. So I got my start, my obsession really about Tule Lake about 25 years ago when I went on my first pilgrimage in 2000 and was standing inside the jail, Tule Lake's jail, which Jeff Burton here described as it was one of the most conspicuous symbols of the incarceration. And what is remarkable is, given how conspicuous and how iconic it is, it's amazing that we know so little about the jail. But I was standing inside the jail, and there was an older man who stood next to me, and he whispered to me, "I was a bad boy," right? This was in response to my question. Or he had said to me, "I was in the jail," he whispered. And he didn't use bad in the terms like, bad, ironically. He really had internalized the shame that people carried around about Tule Lake, that he had done something wrong. And I kind of puzzled over that for a while, but and it took me some time to understand the way our community internalized the government's propaganda that protest was bad, protest was disloyal, and that kind of internalized racism has been carried to the present. In the whole framing of loyalty and disloyalty. People still think of, how patriotic their families were, and really have not embraced the stories of the people who were our Malcolms and our Martins, and the people like Geronimo and Sitting Bull who fought, the theft of their land. So, after that, I got involved with the Tule Lake Committee, and the committee began working on making the Tule Lake pilgrimage a safe place for people who resisted, for people who were the no-nos, people who were the renunciants, to make it a safe place for them to tell their stories. Because I believe that if we hadn't done that, most of these stories would have been erased, because the survivors didn't talk about what happened to them. They, it was so difficult, I think, for people to even understand. A lot of the research was not available. The archival materials were hard to find. So for people to be able to unpack what happened to them was very challenging, especially because there was so little support in our community. So finally, now that 80 years have gone by and all of the survivors who have gone through the experience of renunciation, being stripped of their citizenship, and who may have been sent to Department of Justice camps, all of them are gone. And the main people we have to tell those stories are the descendants. And so they are going to be our story keepers. So we'll have two descendants later in the panel to talk about their family's experience. But, the story of Tule Lake and segregation is really, it is like, it's our version of Guantanamo, or the prisons in El Salvador, the prison in El Salvador, CICOT. And the main purpose was to dehumanize people and to treat them as it is just, they were treated with they're treated with terrible racist stereotypes, and all part of a plan for the government to get rid of them. So, given the power and the persistence of the wartime propaganda, we are so fortunate to have the film that Emiko Omori did. I think everybody in this room already knows that Emiko did the really incredible, wonderful film Rabbit in the Moon, which won an Emmy. It also was, I'm blanking on Sundance. It won Best Doc at Sundance. She's also been a really cutting-edge filmmaker, right? Doing films on tattoos back in the 70s when nobody had tattoos, right, except prisoners and sailors, right? And doing a film on vibrators when probably most people were wondering, what are vibrators? What do you use them for, right? But anyway, she's been like really a path breaker, and this is another film I think that people will remember and talk about. So, Emiko, do you want to come up and introduce your film?
Well, Barbara and I had not talked about her introduction, but she was going to say so. She's given away all my secrets. I made Rabbit in the Moon, of course, with my sister, and I think I might be speaking for her as well, certainly for me, that I was not interested in looking at the camps at all. And then during redress, my sister got involved in all that. Anyway, so we ended up both taking a look at that part of our lives. So then I just said, well, I don't want to be locked into that, and so I made these other films. But here I am back. It's just, you just can't get away from it because, I too am a survivor from Poston. Okay, so I don't want to take too long here. When I began work on this documentary, Barbara Takei showed me a video of the jail made by the National Park Service. The NPS video is about the 10-year restoration of the jail. It was like this old house, strictly about the nuts and bolts of finding period toilets and sinks and matching paint. Nothing about why it had been built and how it was used. This is the kind of history the Trumpsters want, sanitize. So then the Tule Lake Committee description of the jail was This evocative concrete structure represents the darkest moment of the World War II incarceration. But mind you, I didn't know much about it at all. I didn't know much about the history. With that description in mind, I began working on the documentary, seeing the jail as a symbol of repression. But the more I learned, my perspective changed. Apropos of this conference, the jail is both a symbol of repression and, from a different point of view, that of the inmates, a symbol of resistance. This is a work in progress. That means it's temporary music and not color grade and all that. Well, anyway, so the title sort of changed then in the process of making the movie, and now it's called Defiant to the Last, the story of the Tule Lake jail. So you can roll film. Thank you.